brought his reign, his terrible reign, to an end when they signed a petition. The Board of American Loyalists formed a petition to have Lord Dunmore removed from the island. But he got land grants on Long Island, New Providence, and Harbor Island. Dunmore's Long Island, and Dunmore Town, I think, is in Harbor Island. And they said the Archbishop, the Catholic Archbishop, lives in one of his houses on Eastern Road. Yeah. Joseph Eve, you know the Eve brothers. So Eve is not a very popular last name, but they did exist. Joseph and Oswald Eve. Joseph Eve was born living in Pennsylvania during the war. Land grants were given to him on Cat Island, where he invented the cotton ginny. It was very popular right back then. He was also the architect of St. Matthew's Anglican Church. The architect and builder of St. Matthew's Anglican Church was Joseph Eve. Oswald Eve was his brother. He was a cotton planter on Cat Island. He died and is buried on Cat Island. Charles Farquharson, Loyalist, land grant on Watlin's Island called San Salvador. He had 2,000 acres and 50 slaves. It is speculated that he was Scottish and lived in South Carolina. Thomas Forbes was the MP for Abaco, also a Nassau merchant and a member of the Board of Loyalists, a member of the firm Ponton, Leslie and Company. James Hepburn, the famous James Hepburn. You all should really know him. He was a brilliant Scottish lawyer. In fact, he was the lawyer for King George III in the colonies during the war. He was so intelligent. He was born in Scotland, but he lived in South Carolina, in Wilmington, South Carolina. And he arrived in East Florida with his slaves and immediately started the Board of American Governors of Loyalists, right here in Nassau. And why did they start the board? To protect and live in the Bahamas, to protect, I don't know where they protect them from. He was elected the member of Cat Island in 1784. He was the first member elected for Cat Island in 1784. He received a land grant of 700 acres in Cat Island. He was also responsible for the first boycott and fired along with his Loyalist colleagues, and he is also buried on Cat Island. William Lightfoot Key, he was banished from Georgia. He's on the list of the Georgia Loyalists that were banished. He received land grants in Western New Providence, 448 acres, and Lightfoot Key, and he also had property in Cat Island near Port Howe. He lived in Port Howe, and he farmed in Lightfoot Key. But when he died, and discovered recently, when he died, he had a lot of debt. He died in debt. So his property went up for sale. And guess who purchased the property? William Wiley. He purchased it along with Clifton. Those two properties would belong to him. Anyway, I'll tell you about it another time. There's a great lady in our history called Vianney Malone. Now, you all should know Vianney Malone. If you've ever been to Hopetown Island, she came to the Bahamas and was a member of the board of. She came to the Bahamas and got land grants in Abaco, which she called Hopetown. She was so happy to reach the Bahamas wherever she was going. Was so hopeful. She called it Hopetown. And in Hopetown, if you've ever been to Hopetown, you'll never want to come back to Nassau more. They have a museum, and in the museum they have everything that Vianney Malone, I believe, she ever owned is in that museum. Everything she ever wore. I saw some slippers. I don't know how they did that. I don't know. I congratulate them for that. There's another loyalist that was a member of the Board of Loyalists called George Miller. All the ones, people here from Long Island, and Andros Miller. You should know George Miller. He was also a member of the Board of Loyalists, a member of Parliament in 1784 for Andros, received land grants in Andros and in Long Island. He was also fired by King George III for being insubordinate, for not attending meetings. And he was one of the men that walked out with James Hepburn when he walked out and nearly closed the house down. James Morse, Crooked Island, member of Parliament, Loyalist, large slave owner, elected for Crooked Island in 1781 on Crooked Island. So his plantation was called True Blue. So if you know True Blue, Crooked Island, you know that belonged to him. He died on September 26, 1785. John Petty from Eleuthera. Anyone who knows the Eleuthera Pettys know that John Petty was the member of parliament for Eleuthera. He had land grants in Eleuthera and Turks and Caicos Island. He was also fired and expelled by the king for protests in the House of Assembly. Dennis Roll moved his possessions and his slaves and everything he'd pack up on a boat called Peace and Plenty and went down to Exuma, established Rollville and Steventon. Lord John Roll was his son, and when Lord Dennis Roll died, Lord John Roll took over everything. John Wells, he's in the cemetery near the Paradise Island Bridge with a chain around his tomb. In his tomb, he and his daughter are buried in one tomb. She was coming to New Providence because she was sickly on the boat. So when she got there, her in his tomb together. John Wells was a loyalist from North Carolina. He established the first printing of newspaper and books in the Bahamas. He started printing in North Carolina. When he went to East Florida, he printed in North Carolina and East Florida again, and then he printed in the Bahamas, called the Bahamas Gazette. It was printed twice, and then it went to be printed monthly. He died in 1799, and he's buried, like I say, in the near the Paradise Island Bridge, a cemetery that looks fancy. He's buried there. He was also expelled in 1785 for insubordination, for talking back and writing letters, bad letters about the House of Assembly members. Great William Wiley, oh my Lord. Where they got him from? He was a hot-headed Irishman, hot-headed. He did all sorts of things, even armed his slaves and everything. But he was also the Attorney General and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He gave himself property. They gave themselves property. He had Tusculum, I think the area called Orange Hill, I think. Clifton, Lightfoot, and Key in the west of New Providence. I'm getting to the end of it right now. There's one loyalist I didn't mention here. His name is Wade Stubbs. Any Stubbs in the audience here? Wade Stubbs was an English loyalist. He lived in East Florida. He got the most property, 3,000 acres in Turks and Caicos. Wayne's Grain Plantation in Turks and Caicos is his property, 3,000. He was one of the richest. He was the richest one. He was worth millions when he died, millions. And he's the only loyalist whose slaves escaped and they haven't found them yet. 13 slaves on this, and he searched for them for years. 13 slaves got themselves armed and they got in a boat and they just disappeared. He searched for them everywhere. He couldn't find them. He didn't know where they went. They said maybe they went to Cat Island. I don't know. What do y'all think? Now, let me get, no, there's much more, many more loyalists. I mean, about 8 to 10,000, many more. This is just some that I picked out because I didn't mention the Keys, the people in Abaco. I didn't mention all those loyalists that went into Abaco. I mean, they've been in there by the hundreds. Grand Title Key and all those Abaco places with the key on the end, they're loyalist settlements. They are. Now, the record of black loyalists in the Bahamas is very scant, but Prince William, a Baptist minister, arrived in 1779. He was a freed slave, perhaps a black loyalist from the Carolinas. He founded Bell Baptist Church and St. John's Native Baptist Church on Meade Street. He came an accomplice. He had an assistant pastor, Samuel Shriven. He was also assistant pastor at Bell Baptist Church. Joseph Scott went to Abaco. He was a black man. He was a carpenter from South Carolina. And then William and Hale, a family from New York, they went to Abaco too. I'm trying to find out what's going on in Abaco because everybody was just gravitating to Abaco. Joseph Paul and his wife Suzanne and 3 children arrived in Abaco about 1790. Joseph was a Methodist pastor. His church, he came to New Providence, his church on the corner of Augusta Street in Nassau, the first Methodist church ever built in the Bahamas. He also had the associate school, first built in the Bahamas. And Boston King was a Baptist minister. He also came in, almost finished. In 1885, about 80 adult blacks departed New York for Vera, Abaco. John Scott, a carpenter from South Carolina, where he went, to Abaco. I believe Abaca was a safe haven for everybody. But I think I can go on, but there's another presentation, and I think I'm going to go. Thank you all for listening very attentively.